Outsourcing tends to have a bad reputation as being low quality. Partner Hero's value-based approach raises the bar for the outsourcing industry by investing in employee empowerment and career growth, paying above-market salaries, and maintaining a focus on quality and performance. They're more than a service provider. They're also a thought partner for the startups they serve. It's simple. Brands that care about quality customer experience choose Partner Hero. They offer flexible terms and the ability to scale quickly, perfect for startups, with quality assurance baked into every program and offices around the world. So Partner Hero can provide truly global coverage. Outsourcing has long been available mainly to big businesses, but Partner Hero is challenging business as usual by bringing the benefits of outsourcing to businesses of all sizes with short, flexible contracts and fast ramp-up times. 10 years ago, when we were launching the Action Catalyst, we could have used a few extra hands to help us scale quickly, even if it was just for a short while. You can bet that with their expertise, fast onboarding, and core focus on quality, Partner Hero would have had our attention. If you're ready to bring in outside customer support help for your startup that feels like it's a part of an existing team, check out Partner Hero. Head over to partnerhero.com/Action Catalyst to book a free consultation with our solutions team. Mention you heard about Partner Hero from the Action Catalyst, and they'll even waive the setup fee. Now, on to the show.
From Nashville, Tennessee, Southwestern Family of Companies welcomes you to the Action Catalyst. Each week, we share insights and inspiration from movers and shakers in the world of business. Our goal is to help you increase your self-discipline, overcome procrastination, and help you to take action on all the things that really matter.
How do you become the expert in your space? And why should you become an expert in your space? That is what we are talking about today. We're talking a little bit about building a brand, a little bit about becoming a celebrity inside of your own community or inside of your own trade. It's becoming a rock star in your industry, becoming the go-to person on something, and shaping the way that people think of you and when do they think of you in a way that forwards your business, and also in a way that aligns your passions with your business. How can you connect those things? And our guest is a really unique guest. This conversation, I hope you enjoy, is very unique because we're talking to somebody who has a very, very specific niche, or started with a very specific niche. They're not a business expert in general, not a speaker, not an author that writes to many people. It's somebody who does real estate, but they just did real estate in Tennessee. But not only real estate in Tennessee, they did real estate in Nashville. And not only did they do real estate in Nashville, they started off doing real estate in Hillsboro Village, which is a 1 mile radius. And this man that you're about to hear from, Mark Deutschmann, started his career 30 years ago focusing on a 1 mile radius, and it has expanded to become what is a very well respected brand in the Nashville area called Village Real Estate, and they now serve the whole community. But this is the story of how they started, and the reason for it is you might not be in real estate, so it's not so much about the practice of a 1 mile radius in a geographic way. But after this interview, we're going to talk about how do you apply that same concept of a 1 mile radius to your life or to your business or to your company or your personality to help build your brand and help you build your business by adopting this, air quotes, 1 mile radius, which is what the title of Mark's book is, but it's also, it seems like, the central theme to his strategy. So we're going to talk about how to become the expert in your space, how to become the celebrity brand in your community, how to grow your business, and how to make a difference in other people's lives.
This episode is sponsored by Southwestern Coaching. Southwestern Coaching has helped over 12,000 people increase their incomes by over 25% on average. As a successful salesperson, you know the importance of increasing your sales, but sometimes you might just need a little extra push and accountability to meet your goals and grow your business. Southwestern Coaching will help you increase your income through one-on-one sales and leadership coaching tailored specifically to your needs. Together, we will elevate sales. To schedule your free one-on-one business action planning session with a Southwestern coach, go to www.southwesternconsulting.com/action catalyst.
One of the things that we admire and respect most at Southwestern Consulting is practitioners. People who are not just teaching great ideas, but people who are living great ideas, and they're producing real results every single day. And the man that you are about to meet is a Nashville celebrity, especially among the business community. And Mark Deutschmann is the founder of Village Real Estate, and he's been in the business for over 30 years here in Nashville. And if you know anything about Nashville, you know that this has become one of the most vibrant cities really in the world, and just the reputation of the city and how fast it's growing. And Mark is truly one of the pioneers, one of the most influential people that has caused or catalyzed or been a part of that movement happening. And his company, they've got several hundred agents, very well respected here in town. He also has an MBA. He is an avid juggler, which is sort of an interesting fact. And he has a degree in his undergrad. He has undergrad degree in zoology and Spanish. He just has this philosophy about community and the strategy called 1 mile radius that I really love. And I think it goes beyond real estate. And so had to have him on the show, wanted to talk to him. So Mark, thanks for being here.
I appreciate your interest.
Yeah. So speaking of interest, I think one of the very first things that I noticed when I first picked up the book was that community to you obviously is a part of your business, because you're a realtor and company, and a lot of real estate agents listen to this show. So I think those people will relate. But as I started reading the book, it dawned on me that you seem to have a genuine passion for community. Just not even just real estate community, but the interconnectedness of people. So where did that come from, or why is that so important to you, or is that just something you've always been enthusiastic and excited about, or talk a little bit just about that concept of community?
Well, first of all, when I came to Nashville, and this is late 80s, Nashville had a fairly hollow core. We had no residential downtown. We were known as a central business district, and it was sort of a shell of what it is today. Additionally, because of the car-centric culture, we had a lot of neighborhoods that lacked neighborhood commercial districts, places for people to gather, opportunities for community. So we were a city with an urban fabric that didn't really create places for people to gather and commune. So I started noting that early in my real estate career and began to focus on places where people could gather. So it just sort of sparked my interest in community. I'm not sure that came from zoology degrees or Spanish degrees or working with in other jobs before real estate, but it was something that sort of sparked with me when I moved to Nashville.
I feel like I'm in a season of my life where I'm joining more communities. I'm seeing the value of community. One of the other things that really jumped out to me, and I had heard about this, I'd heard this phrase in grad school, but I honestly hadn't heard anybody talk about it. This idea of the triple bottom line. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. And it's certainly become a more trendier concept, and you see more examples of companies doing it. But for somebody who is listening, what is the triple bottom line? If they've never heard of that philosophy, I know that is something that you and your wife, also a very, very successful entrepreneur, your families seem to sort of operate with this concept in mind. What is it?
Yeah, I think it is thinking about business as a tool for creating community and as a tool for social change. As I was moving to Nashville, I was also getting involved with a group called the Social Venture Network. And this was a group of business owners across the country that were committed to using business as a tool for social change. They included people like Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's, Anita Roddick of The Body Shop, Gary Hirschberg of Stonyfield Yogurt, and they each had something that they were passionate about. They could do with their business for their communities. Some people were interested in, labor. Some people were interested in better farming practices. Some people were interested in using business as, for a tool for political activism. I was very impressed with the way these businesses not only were the business owners doing work in their community, they were actually engaging their business as a tool. So that gave me a spark that helped me think about that triple bottom line, thinking about, of course, having a successful business and creating profitability,
Sure.
but then in turn, figuring out ways to leverage that to engage and enhance the communities where we serve.
Yeah. So the triple bottom line is the business profits, serving the community, and then what's the third one?
Well, for me, and I'll speak to my experience, I started working in these ring neighborhoods in and around urban Nashville. And when I started Village in 1996, I took a piece of the company and called it the Village Fund, and I actually gave it away to the Tides Foundation in San Francisco. So they were one of the social venture network businesses. It was a nonprofit, but they were involved in social venture network, and I gave them a piece of the company. Now, what this meant was that if I grew my business, then one of my shareholders, the Village Fund, would also get more prosperous. And that's indeed what's happened. We began sharing some of our profits back with the community. And then as I started recruiting agents to my firm, I asked them to be change agents and asked them to be thinking about where in the community they might plug in. And I asked them to give a percentage of their profits back to the community. So the Village Fund became a tool for us to make change. We specifically decided that we wanted to make change through our homes, neighborhoods, and in the areas that we served. So we focused on things that were applicable to housing, like affordable housing and retrofitting houses for energy savings. And we thought about commercial districts and gathering places. So we focused on urban art and urban tools for youth, to be engaged in their community. We focused on urban environmental issues so that we created better stewardship for neighborhoods in downtown. So over time, we were giving monies to over 200 different nonprofits in our community. And we're able to give, we know that they're the experts in their own fields. And so we can apply our funds to them and let them do the good work they're doing. And it's something that lifts us all. The Village Fund has now given nearly $2 million back into the community. So it's growing, sort of growing every day because our agent body is growing as well. So we're a community that's giving to community, and it becomes a virtual circle because
very cool.
We're working with these people. They care about what we do. We care about what they do. And it's made Nashville a healthier place.
Yeah, I love it. And now, so I want to shift a little bit to some of the business strategy. And I think it's obviously very applicable to realtors, but you hear people talk a lot about what is your unique selling proposition? What makes you different from all the thousands of other people out there that do what you do, whether you're real estate or financial advisor, insurance, or any business, just authors, consultants, speakers, right? There's a million people like us. And you very early on selected this strategy called 1 mile radius.
Mm-hmm.
What is that one? What is a 1 mile radius strategy, and sort of why do you think it matters, and how does it help?
So my 1 mile radius strategy was a tool to help me become known as a real estate professional. And I took on that unique selling proposition when I started selling. I figured that I should be an expert in one particular location. So I took a geographic location, Hillsborough Village, which is here in Nashville. I got involved in that neighborhood. I helped to organize the neighborhood merchants. I helped to work with Vanderbilt University, which is next door, and to create some synergies with that institution. I got involved in Music Row and some of the creatives and helped think about what was happening there. And when people asked me what I did, I said, I sell real estate within a 1 mile radius of Hillsborough Village. And typically they would ask, is that all you do? And I'd say, well, yes, but I know the condition of every house. I know who owns them. I know if they're duplexes, quadplexes. I know that people are interested in these kinds of houses coming in from the suburbs now. If you need a house near Hillsborough Village, I'm the guy for you. And even though it was a small, unique selling proposition, it did have a tangible meaning to my consumers, and the strategy worked. And soon I was selling 27 houses, then 43 houses a year, then 62 houses, then 84 houses, then over 100 houses. So I built a robust career using that strategy. And I had a second unique selling proposition that gave me another circle of influence, and it is about community building. As you noted, I am a juggler. And when I came to Nashville, I was actually a very good juggler. This is 30 years ago, remember, and I could juggle 5, 6, 7 balls, 5 clubs. I passed 8 clubs with people. I juggled fire, knives, all that stuff. And I was a performer, and I would use that to get out in community. I did shows for the music industry. I did corporate gigs. I did television advertising for Toyota, and some other firms. And as I got into real estate, people knew me as a juggling realtor. So I actually wore suspenders and Converse sneakers, and I went to award shows dressed in that attire. So I didn't look like other agents either. And I acted like a juggler and a juggling realtor. So I had two strategies to make sure that I stood out in the crowd, and they helped me in my career.
So one of my favorite lines that I stumbled across in the book was you said, when they thought of Hillsborough Village, they thought of me. And you created intentionally this interconnectivity. And that is, we get into branding occasionally on the show, and we talk about what a brand is. And I've actually said this before on the show, that to me, branding is, what do people think of when they think of you? And so when they thought of you, they thought of Hillsborough Village. But also, I really appreciated, it's also the way that you wrote that line made me think it's also the inverse of that. It's what trigger causes people to think about you. Well, that was a very intentional part, an intentional choice that you made, a strategic choice. You said, I'm just going to be known for this thing. So I guess my question is, do you think the 1 mile radius strategy, or how does that apply to people who are not just in real estate? I mean, in real estate, we talk about, working a farm or sort of having your 1 mile radius. But how do you think that strategy applies to people that are not just in real estate specifically?
Well, for one, I'd say that when I talk to my real estate agents, for instance, and we have 350 agents and staff at Village.
Yeah, I know that's
350 agents and staff at Village. And I ask them who they are. They all come from somewhere before they got into this business. And what is it that they bring to the business? And is there some way to align their passions and their hobbies and their avocations and connections and community to a unique selling strategy for them in business? And if somebody's coming from the music industry here in Nashville, and they are really connected to all the engineers and musicians and others that are in that field, it makes sense for them to focus on that group as their core customer group, and to use something that they're really good at and try to tie that into the message that they send to the community. If they do something that's totally different, they're not really going to be into it. It doesn't really define who they are. So I guess I would encourage somebody to think about who you are as you define your strategy. It's not something that you just make up. As you get into any business, you've come from somewhere, and you have something in your core competency that can apply to what you're doing.
I love that. I don't think people make that connection enough of how their hobbies can connect directly to what they're doing, or they can at least use them as ways for lead generation or building community and generating referrals and so forth and so on. A couple quick questions here. These are just more general questions. One, I mean, to build a local agency of several hundred agents. I mean, obviously, we've had people on the show that have had thousands and thousands of realtors, but they're nationwide. And you guys have built such a strong presence and such a great reputation in Nashville. And when you think about sales, and a lot of people listening are in some type of sales. What do you think, if you had to give sort of one piece of advice to a salesperson and you said, if I only had one sentence to sort of, all right, that I tell my agents or anybody I know that's in sales is that if you're going to be successful for the long haul, you have to blank. Like, what, do you have anything that comes immediately to mind there?
Well, sure. I mean, one is that you have to be able to know what to say when people ask you what you do. Because people in our culture in the United States, we always ask each other, what do you do? And if you can't define that in a way that's interesting to them or captures them within, 30 seconds or even 10 seconds, then whatever you say is going to go right over their head and they won't remember you. So you have to really have a good answer to that, and you have to get it down to some really good talking points. I would also say that you don't have to stick with something forever. So my original strategy was I sell real estate within a 1 mile radius of Hillsborough Village. Later, I switched to I help developers manage their risk when they're selling their multifamily residential projects, because I started selling big projects like the Icon and some big condo projects downtown. I shifted into a different strategy that made more sense for me in that stage of my career. And currently, even a company can, for me as a company owner, I can say, Village is more urban than most. And basically I'm saying we work in all the ring neighborhoods here in Nashville, and we service multifamily residential in the downtown core. So I can define a strategy for my whole agency that helps my agents get the business. So when you think about what you do, you have to have a clear idea of what you're going to say when people do ask you, and they'll ask you every day, all day long. So you should know what to say and do not ramble with it. And note that you might have 1, 2, or 3 if you want to. You can have a different answer for different people depending upon the context of the conversation if you think it's useful. So a salesperson doesn't have to be locked into one strategy, but there should be one, overlying strategy that you use on a regular basis, but there may be some others that are in development but we don't stay static either. Our careers change, we change, our interests change over time, and we can grow ourselves with our careers.
I like that. I like the idea of it's okay to have a couple, because there's different environments, there's different scenarios, but having that locked in. And then, all right, so here's my last question for you. Similar, but not the salesperson, but now talking to entrepreneurs. Specifically, obviously, you're very active in the entrepreneur community here around town. And I think more and more there's an increasingly growing population of people who either have quote unquote a side hustle, or even at Southwestern Consulting, our team, we use the term intrapreneur because we're not technically entrepreneurs in the sense that we all sort of own, but we operate collectively together with freedom and flexibility. So I think that word entrepreneur can mean different things to different people. Or direct sales, there's a lot of people that listen that are in direct sales. But when you take off your sales hat and you put on your business owner hat, you put on your CEO hat, that's something that both you and Sherry seemed to have done such an amazing job with. So we're then talking to the entrepreneur and we ask the same question. If you had to give a single piece of advice and you only had one sentence and you said, look, this is the biggest thing you need to know if you're going to succeed as a business owner, how would you fill in that blank?
Before I say that, since you've mentioned Sherry, my wife Sherry, she grew a company called Letter Logic, and her company prints and mails patient statements to hospital and physician groups throughout the country. And her focus had always been, I do not put my customer first. In fact, she sold that to her customers by saying that I put my employees first. And then she described all the things that she did for her employees, which were amazing. And they always were taken aback when she told them she didn't put them first, her customers, but then they realized that by putting her employees first, they were going to get better care and they were going to be serviced in the way that they would love to be serviced. And so that's how she grew her business and sold her business last year at a very nice multiple of her EBITDA. For me, when you asked that question about one thing to fill in the blank, I'm going to ask you to say it again because I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah, so it's okay. So the question would be if you only had one piece of advice. So it sounds like for an entrepreneur, kind of the one thing you need to know to be successful. It sounds like Sherry might say, don't put your customers first.
Right.
Put your employees first. Would you say that's yours also, or do you have a more of a would you have a different one that would be like your central philosophy as a leader?
Well, for me, as I entered into this business, one of my central philosophies was the core is the new edge. And so I was thinking about the shift from suburban flight, and this is a 30-year history, back into the city. And I noted that 2.5 billion people are moving back into cities across the world in the next 30 years or so. So cities are going to have to be created intentionally, and we have to think about the core. What's happening in our downtown. We have to be thinking about our infrastructure and the corridors and transit and affordable living and all the issues of today. And we have to be thinking about walkable neighborhoods, ring neighborhoods, our Greenways system, how people connect to neighborhood commercial districts and connect to their jobs. So I think about all those things as my core philosophy, and this is me as a real estate entrepreneur. But I would also say to just anybody, if you're going to pick something, and this might be speaking to millennials who might have 4 or 5 different things up their sleeve that they want to do, pick something that you really connect with and that you're very passionate about and plan on sticking with it for a while. I had always been, as a juggler, I had always been what I called a jack of all trades, a master of none, and I could do a lot of things well. But when I finally decided that I was going to take on real estate as a career, I committed to 7 years. And I said, I'm going to stick with something for 7 years and make sure that I have success. I don't think that you can create instant success in anything that you're doing. You have to think about it and apply your skills, your passions, your unique selling proposition, the things that you do over time to create that success. So think about it not as a day to day, but a year to year, and make sure that you give it a chance to work.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Well, Mark Deutschmann is the man you've heard from. Village Real Estate is the company, and 1 Mile Radius is the name of the book, and also kind of the corresponding strategy here around creating a community and making a difference. And Mark, I just want to say on behalf of everyone that lives in Nashville, thank you for your contributions. And I know you talk a lot about the people you've partnered with, and so there's been a lot of people who have helped make Nashville what it is today. We wish you and your team and the book all the best.
I appreciate, again, your interest in what I'm doing. I appreciate you.
So I am super excited to debrief that conversation, because I think, many times we bring on an expert or a guest, our guest is somebody who has a book or is a CEO, has a really distinct kind of philosophy. And then there's kind of a clear connection to maybe how this applies to our life and to us. And, in Mark's case, he has written a book, but he's not really in this, his business is real estate. And so I really wasn't even sure. I reached out to him, which I don't often do, and invited him to come on to the show because I felt like there was something really powerful that he was doing. There was some sort of central philosophy that I wanted to learn from and that I thought you would benefit from, although I didn't necessarily know what it was exactly because we hadn't spent that much time together. And I think there is a very powerful connection in what he just talked about directly to your life and to your business, directly to any business. And this one, it may not seem as directly obvious a connection. And so I'm really excited to just kind of share with you how I processed this. And I think while what he did and talks about is the story about how he built one of the most successful and certainly influential real estate practices in Tennessee, or Nashville for sure, and influenced a whole city, and that is the way in which he did it is really, really powerful. This concept of the 1 mile radius. This title, 1 mile radius, really spoke to me. And, here you just heard this whole story about how he focused on his niche first. He focused on the core. He focused on this one little part of town. But he became the guy in that space. It was like when people said, "Is that the only thing you do?" He was like, "Yes, that's the only thing I do." And he basically built a celebrity. He became a celebrity in a small community. And this is such a powerful universal lesson, because today with the internet, it's like it's one great big giant world. And so how do you become a celebrity? How do you become the expert in perceived as an expert? How do you draw attention in a world where there is just an infinite number of things vying for people's attention span? And what Mark did that was so brilliant was he owned a small space. That's how he started out, was owning a small space. And so that is really powerful. And I think that is a branding lesson that has a lot of teeth and a lot of miles, regardless of if you're in real estate or not. So I want to kind of walk you through this sort of concept, that you should be known as the expert in one thing. That is, if you can do that, then that is what is going to sort of launch your career. And if you can sort of own one thing first, then later you can expand into other things. But if you try to do all these different things at first, then you're sort of the jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing, and you can't break through the noise. And so you have to become the expert first. You have to become the known authority or the leading brand on one thing first to sort of break through the noise, break through the clutter, break through the crowd. And then once you have done that on one thing, you become somebody who is noted as an expert or as a brand or as a celebrity inside of a small community. And then from there, you can expand into other things. So what we're going to talk about here is, I'm just going to share with you sort of this 3-step process to becoming the expert in your space, or this 3-part journey that you can go on to really be seen as the expert. And what's powerful about that is once you're known as the expert, then people come to you, right? It doesn't mean that you shouldn't still prospect and you shouldn't still market and you shouldn't still make outbound sales calls. You should still do that. It just means that in addition to while you're doing that, what happens is people are going to come to you. They're going to be attracted to you. And so it's a worthwhile pursuit to at least pay a nod and of attention towards really becoming one of the experts in your field, in your space, in your industry, in your geographic territory, in your whatever community or communities that you are sort of a part of. So before we dive into this little 3-part process, what I'm going to share with you is this is a very in-depth process. In fact, we coach people through it. We train people through it. We have a whole, division of our team at Southwestern Consulting that does digital marketing for companies and helps them create a strategy. And a lot of this conversation applies there. Anybody really building a platform, which every company is building a platform. And so in the digital marketing world, we have this conversation a lot. We also have a team of people that works with aspiring, kind of people who are speakers and authors trying to elevate their sales, trying to book more gigs or to sell more books or build more of a platform. And so this just applies to a lot of different entrepreneurial landscapes. And we're not going to be able to go in, super deep detail, but I'm going to give you these sort of 3 parts. Before we dive into that, we need to take a second to understand what is a brand. And this came up in the conversation with Mark, because that's a good question. What is a brand? Essentially, a brand is, what do people think of when they think of you? So when someone says your name, what are all the things that come to mind? That is your brand. Or if they say your company, right? And whenever they say your company name, they go Southwestern Consulting. What comes to mind? And the brand isn't owned by you. The brand is owned by the public marketplace, by the audience, because they're the ones who determine what they think of when they think of you. But you can influence your brand. You can shape your brand. You can try to sort of massage it and maneuver it a little bit to try to influence what people think of you. And that's what Mark did. He told everyone, I am the guy in Hillsborough Village. And that was it. 1 mile radius. It wasn't Tennessee, it wasn't Nashville, it wasn't Davidson County. It was a 1 mile radius. He became the guy on that thing. You and I have the same chance to do that. To become the gal or the guy or the company that is in the thing, right? And so that is what a brand is. What do people think of when they think of you? And then the other side of it is what makes people think of you. So that's kind of the other side of the coin, is what makes people think of you. But that is what a brand is. And when you talk about becoming the expert in your space, it is building a brand. It is becoming known for something. And it's something around Southwestern that over the years, over 150 years, all of our family of companies, we haven't really been all that focused on building a brand. We've been focused on building character and building people and building these great companies and, doing direct sales and sales and leadership training and sales and leadership coaching. And all of our family of companies have these really solid practices in the way of sales and leadership. But because of that, we never really paid that much attention corporately to sort of branding and that. And so we definitely have our expertises, each of our companies, but we're really more now, just in the last recent, maybe 5 or 10 years, really paying attention and focusing on more of a public perception, because we just historically haven't valued perception that much. We've been much more interested in practice and being in principles and being a great company and not telling people that we're a great company. But there's value in both, right? You need to be a great company, but you need people to know about you, and you need them to think about you in a way that is uplifting to your overall mission. And part of the way that you can do that is by, owning a very specific space, which is what is your 1 mile radius? That is going to be your brand. Especially if you're just getting started out, try to own one small thing. And then later, once you own that thing, you can expand. And if you think about, like Amazon would be a good example of this. Amazon sells everything now, right? But how did they first start? They just sold books. That was how they started. They were the place to go to for books, and then they pivoted into everything else. It's a great practical example. Mark did the same thing. He owned a 1 mile radius, and now, that's all expanded, and we're going to talk about that in our 3-part plan. So if you understand what a brand is and who owns it and who gets to influence it, you don't control it, but you get to influence it, and there's a lot of value to it because of the magnetic draw of being the expert or being the celebrity in your space. And then that creates a foundation from which you can expand into other things. There's a lot of power in this. So then how do you do it? And this is really hard. It's really hard. It is very hard to build a celebrity brand. It is very hard to become known as the expert. Why? Because everybody's out there trying to do the same thing. And there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of volume. And especially today with social media and email marketing and podcasts and books, the bad news is it's easier than ever for people to kind of get a message out to the world. So there's a lot of there's more messaging that you're competing with. The good news is it's easier than ever to get a message out to the world. And so if you do this right, it's never been easier in terms of having access to the tools and it being affordable for a company or a person or both to build, be known as the expert in their space, to become sort of the celebrity. And there is a wrong way to do it, and there is a right way to do it. There's a way that works. So step number 1 is to find your uniqueness. Find your uniqueness. And it would, you cannot talk about this without giving a shout out to a person that gave me the most powerful piece of branding advice I'd ever received. And his name is Larry Winget. He's not a branding expert, although he is a branding expert, but he doesn't teach it. He's another speaker, author type, one of the Hall of Fame speakers. And Larry said, the key is to find your uniqueness and exploit it in the service of others. He said, that is what a brand is. You find your uniqueness and you exploit it in the service of others. Best branding advice I've ever received. Super, super clear, right? Find your uniqueness and exploit it in the service of others. Now, the problem is that's easier said than done. So how do you find your uniqueness? Well, one of the things that we do is we take companies or personalities through a process that we call the brand flower. And this is going to be hard, not going to be hard, but being that I can't draw this out for you, I'll kind of explain it and you'll have to visualize it a little bit. But you can also, always talk with one of our consultants and, we can tell you more about this kind of stuff. But we use a diagram called the brand flower. And if you think about the flower petals around the outside, there's basically, all the flower petals around the outside represent a question that you need to answer. And I'll give you what the questions are. And then in the center is where your brand lives. In other words, that is your uniqueness. Okay, so this is the first step of a very long journey of helping people kind of get clarity on exactly what their uniqueness is. So the first question is, what am I passionate about? What am I passionate about? Your brand, whether it is for a company or for a personality, is going to be tied to your passion. It is not going to be your passion, though, necessarily. So this is an abstract, difficult conversation to have, or complex conversation to have, especially in a podcast in a one-way. But again, for you to get the idea, if you just list out all the things that you're passionate about, your brand is going to be connected to that. You heard Mark talk about this also when he said you want to align your unique hobbies and strategies into the business, right? Like if you can find a way to tie your things you're passionate about into your business, they don't have to be separate. Even, juggling and real estate, those were seemingly about as far as you could possibly be from each other. But he was able to kind of take his love of juggling, and that opened a door to a community that he could then, sell real estate to and meet people with. And so he found a way to connect the two. So the first petal on the brand flower is, what am I passionate about? And if you think about that, okay? Then the next petal on the brand flower, what have I earned the right to talk about? And so you ask yourself or your company that question. And when we take a company through this or a personality through this, we actually facilitate this exercise and walk them through. What have I earned the right to talk about? In other words, like, what is your experience? And Mark, by choosing that 1 mile radius, he earned the right to talk about Hillsborough Village because he said, I am going to be the man on this thing. And he lived it and breathed it every day. And it was like he earned the right to basically talk about that space. And by choosing a smaller space, he earned that right quicker. So what is your experience? Like, what have you really earned the right to talk about? Or what has your company earned the right to talk about? What do you have substantial proof and evidence of actual performance? So what have you earned the right to speak about? Or what has your company earned the right to speak about? The next question, which is the next petal on the flower, so to speak, kind of going around the outside, is related to the previous one, is what do I do as good as anyone in the world? Or what do we do as good as anyone in the world? And a lot of these, it's like, it's hard to say it simply. I mean, we spent a long time at Southwestern Consulting coming up with elevate sales. That's sort of our, that's our catchphrase as a company. We elevate sales. So that's increasing revenue, but also elevating the practice and the perception of what it means to sell and generate revenue. We deal with top line growth. Now, we work in all different industries, all different types of business models. We touch on marketing because lead generation is a part of sales, but at the end of the day, we elevate sales. And it's been a lot of work to boil it down to 2 words, right? To get that sort of clarity. But that is what we feel like we do as good as anyone in the world. We can make cold calls on the phone. We can knock on doors. We can do digital marketing. We can do podcasts. But we know how to generate revenue out of thin air for pretty much any business. And that is what we live and breathe. Well, what do you do as good as anyone in the world? Or what does your business do as good as anyone in the world? The next question, next petal on the flower, is what audience do I have access to? Who is most immediately available to me to reach? That is going to be a part of defining your uniqueness. The next question, who is willing to pay for my message? Who is willing to pay for my message or for my product or for my service or for my expertise? So those 2 questions are sort of related. Then the next question, what problem do I solve? What problem does my company or does my personal brand or whatever, what problem do I solve? And then the last question is, what am I an expert on? Right? The point of going through this is to really find your uniqueness, which lives right there at the center of the flower. So all of these are kind of concentric circles that sort of touch, and somewhere at the intersection of all these answers is where your uniqueness really, really lives. And you have to be able to be clear. Like Mark said, know how to answer the question when somebody says, what do you do? Right? You have to be able to say it quickly and concisely. It has to be extremely clear. And you better be prepared to answer that question. Know how to answer what you do. So that is step 1, find your uniqueness. And that's at least an introduction to one of the frameworks that we use to help people discover that. All right, step 2. So now you kind of know what your uniqueness is. You kind of have identified, all right, this is my 1 mile radius, right? Perhaps. Step 2 is now you have to forward the conversation. You have to forward the conversation. What that means is you've defined your 1 mile radius. What you're going to do is now you're going to enhance that radius. The way that you sort of forward the conversation, first of all, you have to know what the conversation is. So you have to read everything that has been written on your space and topic. In order to properly own a space, you have to know what is all going on there. And then you can research, right, and know everything. And then you start to write and to communicate and to forward the conversation, right? If you're going to sell in Hillsborough Village, you need to know everything that is going on. Then you get to start to shape what goes on. By way of knowing it, then you get a chance to shape it. So there's a whole area of study there, but for your business or your personality, how are you going to forward the conversation? That's the next thing. Then the third step is you're going to build the community. So now you know what your uniqueness is. You sort of defined your 1 mile radius. Now you're forwarding the conversation because you are knowing everything about that little space. And now what you're going to do is you're going to serve that community. You're going to build that community. I also want to make a little plug here for joining the community. If there is a community that already exists, you should join that. You should get involved with that. You should know the other people who are interested in your space or something close to your space so that you become known and you know who the people are. And so much of Mark's stories, right? He's talking about all of the different councils he's involved in and even more after the interview, we're talking about all of these different groups that he has been involved in. He's truly become an expert in that space. So you join a community, but then you build the community. You enhance the community by serving the community. And you say, okay, how do I make this place better? And that's one of the things that I loved about Mark that really stood out to me was he wasn't just saying, I want to sell more real estate. He really fell in love with making that 1 mile radius better. He wanted to make it a better place to live. And then from there, he built the community. Now, what happens when you build the community? Naturally, the community starts to expand, which is where, as you get more and more people coming in, now you start organically reaching into ancillary or surrounding areas. And that is the same thing as becoming known as the expert on one thing. And once you sort of own that one thing, then it's naturally going to start relaying into other things. The point to this is, what is your 1 mile radius? What are you passionate about? What have you earned the right to talk about? What do you do as good as anyone else in the world? And what space can you own before you expand? In other words, what is your uniqueness? And how can you exploit your uniqueness in the service of others? Well, that about wraps up the Action Catalyst podcast for this week. If you haven't yet, please log in to whatever your favorite medium is to listen to the show and both rate this podcast and leave a comment, as that helps new prospective listeners determine if the show's really a good fit for them.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and screenshot this episode to share with your friends on social media. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst, and subscribe to our video podcast on YouTube. Thanks for listening.